Hey, I'm Brandon, 38 years old. My wife, Melissa, is 35. We've been together for 12 years, married for 9, and have 2 kids, a son and a daughter. Our life was normal, stable, predictable. At least that's what I thought, until I found a smartwatch in my car. Not mine, not my wife's. At first, I figured one of the kids left it there, but then a message popped up from an unknown number. And that's when everything changed. Let me take you back to how it all unraveled. You ever have one of those moments where time just stops? Where your brain refuses to process what your eyes are seeing because it knows. It just knows that whatever happens next is about to change your life. Yeah. That was me, sitting in my car, staring at a smartwatch that wasn't mine. Let me back up. It was a regular Tuesday. I had just dropped my daughter off at school, coffee in one hand, steering wheel in the other. A solid 35 minutes late for work. Classic dad stuff. I wasn't even thinking about anything serious. Just debating whether I had enough time to hit the drive-thru for an egg sandwich when I noticed something vibrating on my dashboard. First, I thought it was my phone. But my phone was in my pocket. The vibration came again. That's when I saw it. A black smartwatch sitting right next to my cup holder, screen lighting up. Now, here's the thing, I don't wear a smartwatch. Never have. I'm a simple man. Phone in my pocket, old school Casio on my wrist. My wife, Melissa, she has an Apple Watch. This wasn't an Apple Watch. And it definitely wasn't mine. Now, I probably should have been more suspicious. But the dad brain kicked in first, and my initial thought was, one of the kids must have left it. My son's always playing with gadgets. Maybe he borrowed it from a friend? Maybe it belonged to one of Melissa's coworkers? There were a million innocent explanations, and I was ready to accept any of them. But then the screen lit up again. New message. And it wasn't from a kid's friend, or a coworker, or anyone that should have been texting a device in my car. It was from an unknown number. And the message? Last night was amazing. Same place tomorrow. Well, okay. That's not exactly a kid-friendly text. My brain did a little stutter step. I reread the message, hoping it would magically change into something more reasonable. Something that didn't sound like a top-secret rendezvous. Didn't. Same place tomorrow. Meaning, this wasn't just last night? This was planned? Repeating? I sat there for a second, gripping my steering wheel so tight I'm surprised I didn't rip it off. This had to be a mistake. Maybe a wrong number? Maybe someone was messing around? Or maybe I was about to learn something I really didn't want to know. Now, here's where the little voice in my head started arguing with itself. You know that voice? The one that's always trying to convince you that bad news isn't actually bad news? Hey, Brandon. Maybe this is just a funny misunderstanding. Yeah, buddy. Because anonymous love notes on hidden smartwatches are totally normal. I picked up the watch, turned it over in my hands. It wasn't locked. It was still connected to a phone. Melissa's phone. I stared at it, heartbeat thudding in my ears. My wife's secret smartwatch. A flirty message from a stranger. Something wasn't right. Now, a reasonable person might have pulled over, taken a deep breath, maybe waited until they got home to investigate. Not me. I threw the car into park, right there in a strip mall parking lot, and started scrolling. And let me tell you, that was the exact moment my entire life changed. What I found in those messages. You're not ready, and neither was I. So there I was, sitting in my car, gripping a mystery smartwatch like it was a live grenade. The message still glowing on the screen. Last night was amazing. Same place tomorrow. I had options here. Option 1. I could pretend I never saw it, toss the watch in the glove box, and go on with my day like my world wasn't about to implode. Option 2. I could start digging. Now, I'll be honest, part of me wanted to believe this was all some big misunderstanding. That I'd scroll through the messages and find out she was planning a surprise party or some other innocent nonsense. Maybe last night was about a movie she saw. Maybe same place tomorrow meant a yoga class. But deep down, I knew people don't buy secret watches for yoga. So I took a deep breath and started scrolling. And that's when I realized this wasn't some random mistake. The conversation went way back. Weeks, maybe months, dozens of messages. And it wasn't just one person texting her. There were pictures, voice memos, even a few videos I immediately regretted pressing play on. And then, I saw something that made my stomach lurch. They were talking about me. First, it was little things. Melissa. He's still clueless, or unknown number. Seriously? With how careful we've been, he'll never figure it out. Now, I don't know about you, but when your wife and a mystery person are texting about how clueless you are, that's not a good sign. And then, Melissa wrote something that made my hands go cold. It's so weird having to act normal around him after being with you. Act normal? After being with you? I put the watch down, staring at the windshield like it was going to give me answers.
No.
No. Melissa wasn't doing this. Not to me. Not to our family. I took a breath, tried to slow my thoughts. Maybe, just maybe, this still wasn't what it looked like. Maybe T was a friend. Maybe the messages were taken out of context. But then, I saw the initials. At the top of the chat, instead of a name, the contact was saved as T. Not a full name, just T. And that's when the first, tiniest drop of suspicion crept in. Because Melissa never saved contacts with just initials. She was the type to put full names, emojis, even little notes like coworker or soccer mom Karen. But this? Just T. It was secretive. Too secretive. And suddenly, I had a very bad feeling. Because I only knew one T she talked to regularly. And if it was who I thought it was, oh, I was not ready for what I was about to find next. Trust me, you won't be either. I sat there, gripping the smartwatch, stomach twisting into knots. T. That was the only thing in my head now. Who was T? I ran through the list of possibilities. Trevor, my brother. Tanya, her friend from work. Tony, the guy who fixed our roof last summer. All terrible options for very different reasons. The texts didn't give me much. No first names. No details that screamed. This is definitely the guy ruining your marriage. But then something clicked. The messages were vague on purpose. No personal details. No, hey, how's your mom? Or, how was work? Just times, locations, and the occasional comment about me being clueless. Whoever T was, he didn't need small talk. Because they already knew everything about each other. And about me. I needed more. I needed proof. So, like any husband who's just realized he's potentially being played like a fool, I drove home early. I walked into the house, still gripping the smartwatch like it was a ticking bomb. Melissa wasn't home. Perfect. Now, I'm not the snooping type. Never have been. But when you find a burner smartwatch secretly linked to your wife's phone, you kind of earn yourself one free deep dive investigation pass. So I started searching. Now, I wasn't expecting to actually find anything. People aren't dumb. They don't leave evidence of affairs sitting on the kitchen counter. But something in me said, try anyway. So I did. And it took less than 10 minutes before I found something way worse than the smartwatch. A hidden phone. Brand new. Still in the box. Tucked away under her side of the bed. I just stood there, staring at it, feeling like the universe was trying to personally humiliate me. A second phone? Who even needs a second phone? I grabbed it, heart pounding. Was it locked? Nope. Melissa, in all her brilliance, hadn't even set up a passcode yet. Wide open. So I swiped up, opened the messages, and saw the very first text thread. Guess who it was with? T. And the most recent message? Timestamped just this morning. I can't believe we're still getting away with this. Still? As in, this has been going on for a while. I gripped the phone so tight my knuckles cracked. I scrolled up, fast. And that's when the real gut punch came. Because mixed in with the messages about sneaking around and how clueless I was, there were messages about my son. Now, let me be clear. Nothing seemed off at first. Most of the texts about him were normal. Things like, he's growing up so fast. He did so great at his soccer game. You must be proud of him. But as I kept scrolling, I noticed something weird. They talked about him a lot. More than I'd expect. And not in the way most people do when chatting about someone else's kid. Then I saw one that made me pause. Melissa. I swear, the older he gets, the more he reminds me of you. Reminds her of T. Okay, weird, but not proof of anything. I scrolled further. T. It's crazy, right? Especially with the way he runs. It's almost identical. I frowned. Okay, that was weirder. And then, a few messages later, Melissa. It's funny how genetics work out. Sometimes, people take after someone totally unexpected. I stopped scrolling. My stomach sank. It was subtle. Too subtle. If I hadn't been reading every message with a detective's magnifying glass, I probably wouldn't have thought twice. But something about that line, it felt like a clue. Like an inside joke I wasn't in on. I set the phone down, ran a hand over my face. Because suddenly, I had a question in my head. A question I never thought I'd have to ask. Was my son even mine? And if you think I let that question go unanswered, you don't know me very well. I sat on the edge of the bed, gripping the phone, stomach in freefall. That last message. It's funny how genetics work out. Sometimes, people take after someone totally unexpected. Was still rattling around in my brain like a loose screw. I stared at it, willing it to mean something else. Anything else. But it didn't. And now, an ugly little thought had crawled into my head and refused to leave. I needed to know who T was. Now, Melissa wasn't due home for at least another hour, so I had time. Time to confirm what I already suspected. I scrolled up, hoping to see a full name. Nolak. Just T. Every single time. No last name. No details. No hints. Which meant only one thing. I had to check her contacts. Now, let me tell you something about Melissa. She is painfully organized. The woman labels everything. Grocery lists are color-coded. Bills are alphabetized. Her phone contacts? Full names, extra details, sometimes even their job title. So why was this one just an initial? I backed out of the text thread and opened the contacts list, ready to see something like Tanya from work or Tony the roofer. But what I saw instead, just T. No last name, no details, no email, no work info, just the letter T. And suddenly, I had no doubt in my mind. Because there was only one person in Melissa's life who didn't need an introduction. Only one T who knew our family inside and out. Only one T who could have a full conversation about my son without raising any red flags. Trevor. My brother. My hands went cold. My jaw locked so tight I could feel my own pulse in my teeth. No. 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 I refused to believe it. Trevor? My own blood? We'd grown up together. I'd been the best man at his wedding. He had 3 kids. A whole family. I gripped the phone harder. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was just seeing ghosts. I needed proof. Real proof. So I did what any man in my position would do. I waited until Melissa fell asleep. And then, I took her real phone. Now listen. I'm not proud of this part. But desperate times call for desperate measures. Her phone was locked, but I knew her passcode. Oh, the irony. She thought she was being so sneaky with the smartwatch and the second phone, but her main phone? Wide open. I swiped through her apps, found her texts, and typed in one letter, T. And there he was, Trevor. Full name. And right under his contact info, the same exact messages I had just read on the hidden phone. Word for word. And that's when it hit me. She didn't just have a secret smartwatch. She didn't just have a second phone. She had 2 separate conversations going with my brother. One on her real phone, one on her burner. Because they'd been doing this for so long, they needed 2 devices to keep track of it. I sat there, staring at the screen, nauseous. Because this wasn't just cheating. This was a double life. And the worst part? I still didn't know how far it went. But oh, I was about to find out. You ever have a moment where your brain just refuses to accept what's right in front of you? Like it sees the facts, it knows what's real, but some part of you is just sitting there going, no, absolutely not. This isn't happening. That was me, sitting on the edge of the bed. Melissa asleep next to me. My brother's name glowing on her phone screen. My married brother. My has 3 kids and goes to church every Sunday brother. And my wife. For a second, I did nothing. Just stared. Maybe if I sat there long enough, reality would shift. Maybe the letters on the screen would scramble and tell me something normal. Something I could deal with. But they didn't. Because this was real. So I did what I had to do. I scrolled. And let me tell you, there's something uniquely soul-crushing about reading weeks, maybe months, of texts between your wife and your brother. It started out simple. Melissa, you free later? Trevor, always. Groß. Next. Melissa, I can't wait to see you. Trevor, same. Wish we had more time together. Okay. Now I was getting mad. More time together? You have time. You have my entire damn family. But then, as I kept scrolling, I realized something else. It wasn't just flirting. It wasn't just sneaking around. They were talking about me. At first, the comments were small. Little jabs. Things like, Melissa, he has no idea. He still thinks I'm the perfect wife. Trevor, man, he's oblivious, well. Haha, so funny. Can't breathe from laughing. Then worse stuff. Melissa, it's so weird coming home and having to act normal after being with you. Trevor, must be exhausting. Keeping up that perfect wife act. Excuse me? Perfect wife act. What act? I worked my butt off for this family. I was the one coaching our son's soccer team. I was the one getting up early for school drop-offs. I was the one fixing stuff around the house every time something broke. Melissa wasn't acting like a perfect wife. I was acting like a perfect husband. And apparently, like a perfect idiot too. Because everyone seemed to know except me. Then, I saw something that made my hands go ice cold. Melissa, he doesn't even question it anymore. I could tell him anything and he'd believe it. Trevor, good. Keep it that way. Keep it that way. Keep it that way. Like I was some dumb dog they had trained to sit and stay. I set the phone down, breathing hard. And that's when I saw it. A new text. From Trevor. Time-stamped just an hour ago. He's been acting weird. You think he's starting to suspect? Oh, you mean right now, Trevor? Yeah. Yeah, buddy. I suspect. And trust me, you have no idea what's coming next. I put the phone down. My whole body buzzing like I'd been electrocuted. He's been acting weird. You think he's starting to suspect? That text felt like a challenge. Like they thought they were so damn smart. That I was just some clueless husbandbot wandering through life. Too dumb to notice that my wife and my own brother were sneaking around right under my nose. Oh, but here's the thing about me. I might take a while to catch on. But once I do, I never let it go. I needed to think. I couldn't just storm into our bedroom and demand answers. That's how you end up looking crazy. And if I'd learned anything from watching my friend's divorce play out last year, being the rational one wins you everything. I had to be smart. So, I grabbed my laptop and did something I never thought I'd have to do in my own marriage. I started gathering evidence. Now, I work in finance. I deal with numbers, patterns, things that make sense. I'm not a tech guy, but even I knew that if I was going to confront Melissa, I needed proof she couldn't talk her way out of. So I started digging. First stop, our shared phone plan. I logged in, pulled up the call history, and yep, Trevor's number was there. Over and over. Every single day. Sometimes for hours. At first, it was mostly at night when I was asleep. Then, during the day while I was at work. But the part that made my stomach drop? She was calling him at weird times.
7:15 Uhr morgens.
Right after I left to drop the kids at school. 5:30 p.m. The exact time I usually got home from work. Like she was checking in before I walked through the door. And then, there were the ones I didn't expect. Saturday mornings. Sunday afternoons. Random weekdays when I knew Trevor was supposed to be at work. I sat back, running a hand over my face. They were everywhere, and I'd been blind. But that's not even the part that really got me. No, the real gut punch came later that night. Because once I started looking for signs, I saw them everywhere. Started small. Melissa had been acting different for a while, but I chalked it up to stress. She was distracted, spent more time on her phone, got defensive over little things. But now, with this new perspective, I noticed everything. like how she never left her phone unattended. Not even when she went to the bathroom. Like how she got way too interested in my schedule lately, asking me what time I'd be home, if I was working late, if I had any upcoming business trips. Like how every time we were at a family gathering and Trevor said something, she laughed just a little too hard. And then one more thing. Something I'd never questioned before. Something so small, so seemingly insignificant, that it almost slipped right past me. Our son. Now let me be clear. I love my son. No matter what. That never changed. Never will. But that night, after I shut my laptop and tried to calm down, something popped into my head. A memory. A random conversation from years ago. It was at a barbecue. Melissa was sitting with Trevor's wife, Jessica. I was manning the grill. Jessica had been pregnant at the time, and I remember her laughing and saying, "Isn't it crazy how different kids turn out? Our first two look exactly like Trevor, but this one has my mom's eyes." And Melissa, I remember this so clearly now, had smiled and said, "Yeah. Sometimes genes surprise you." At the time, I hadn't thought twice about it. But now that sentence felt like a loaded gun. Because my son didn't look like me. Not even a little. Dark hair while mine was light. Brown eyes while mine were green. And then the real kicker. He had the same dimple in his chin that Trevor had. The same dimple I never had. I sat there, pulse hammering, as a terrible, terrible thought entered my mind. Could it be? Could Trevor have taken more from me than just my wife? I shut my eyes. There was only one way to find out. And trust me, I wasn't ready for the answer. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts running at 1,000,000 miles an hour. I had proof of the affair. The texts, the phone records, the hidden smartwatch. That was already bad enough. But now I had something worse. A suspicion. And not just any suspicion. The kind that tears your world apart. I looked over at Melissa, peacefully sleeping next to me, like she didn't have a damn care in the world. How long had she been doing this? How long had she been coming home to me, kissing me goodnight, telling me she loved me, while sneaking around behind my back? And God, what if this had been happening since before our son was born? I swallowed hard, because if that was true, then he wasn't mine. And suddenly, every little detail I'd ignored over the years came flooding back. I'd always joked that my son looked more like Melissa than me. But that wasn't the whole truth, was it? He looked like her, sure. But he also looked like someone else. Someone with a dimple in his chin. Someone with the exact same deep brown eyes. Someone who just so happened to be texting my wife every single day behind my back. Trevor. I sat up in bed, rubbing a hand over my face.
No.
No way. This was paranoia talking. I was spiraling, jumping to conclusions. Right? I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof. So, at 2 a.m., while my wife snored beside me, I did the one thing I never thought I'd have to do. I grabbed my phone, and I ordered a DNA test. And let me tell you, waiting for those results? That was the longest week of my life. Waiting for those test results was like living in limbo. Every morning, I woke up hoping I'd been wrong. Hoping I'd open my email and see a message saying, "Congratulations, you're just a paranoid idiot. Your son is 100% yours. And your wife is definitely not sneaking around with your own brother." But every day that passed, the more I realized I already knew the truth. I just needed proof. The worst part? Melissa had no idea. She went about her days like nothing was wrong. Like our marriage wasn't hanging by a thread. She kissed me before leaving for work. Sent me texts like, "Pick up milk on the way home?" And, "Can you believe the PDA wants us to sell cookies again?" Meanwhile, I was barely holding it together. Because in the back of my mind, that ugly little thought was always there. What if he's not yours? And then, there were the other signs. Things I had ignored for years. Melissa had been weirdly protective about our son's baby photos. Anytime we looked at old pictures, she always steered the conversation away from how he looked as a newborn. I remembered a moment, years ago, when a family friend had said, "Wow, he looks just like Melissa." And Melissa had laughed, a little too fast, and said, "Yeah, guess my genes won this time." And back then, I believed her. But now it just sounded like a cover. By the time the results arrived, I had already accepted my fate. I sat in my car, hands shaking as I opened the email. Paternity test results for my son's name. Probability of paternity 0%. 0. 0. 0. My vision blurred. I blinked, trying to process what I was seeing. It didn't matter how much I stared at that number. It didn't change. Melissa hadn't just cheated. She had lied. For 10 years. She had let me raise a child that wasn't mine. Let me believe I was his father. And Trevor, my own damn brother, had been laughing behind my back the whole time. I shut my eyes, because now I wasn't just hurt. I was angry, and I was about to make sure they both regretted every single lie they ever told me. Trust me, revenge was going to be brutal. There's something funny about rage. First, it's wild, uncontrolled. The kind of anger that makes you want to flip tables, punch walls, and scream into the void. But if you let it sit long enough, it does something else. It gets cold. It sharpens. And that's where I was. Because Melissa and Trevor weren't just getting away with this.
No.
I was going to burn everything they built to the ground. The first thing I did? Called a lawyer. I didn't tell Melissa. Didn't tell anyone. Just booked an appointment and spent an hour laying out everything. The affair. The secret phone. The DNA test. And my lawyer? He barely blinked. "You've got more than enough to bury her in court," he said. "We're talking full custody, financial damages, even a lawsuit against your brother for emotional distress if you want to get nasty." I sat back. "I want to get nasty." He grinned. "Good. Let's ruin them." Now, a smart man might have stopped there. Might have played it safe. Gone through the legal system, let the courts do their thing. But me? I wanted them to feel it. So I took my second step. I told Trevor's wife. Jessica, Trevor's wife, was one of those women you don't mess with. Grew up with 4 older brothers. Played varsity soccer. Once chased a guy out of a grocery store for touching her butt. So when I called and said, "We need to talk. It's about Melissa and Trevor," she didn't hesitate. We met up in a coffee shop. I didn't even have to say it. The second I put my phone on the table and scrolled to the screenshots, she knew. Her face went blank. Then, calmly, she picked up her iced latte and threw it at the wall. "That son of a..." I slid the DNA test across the table. She read it, didn't blink. Then, she looked up at me, voice dead steady. "We're ruining them together." And just like that, Melissa and Trevor's perfect little secret was about to explode. And trust me, you're gonna love how it happens. The funny thing about betrayal? It doesn't just take one life down with it. It spreads. Like a wildfire. Like a disease. Like a bomb that's been ticking for years. Just waiting for the right moment to go off. And oh, buddy, we were about to drop the bomb. Step 1. Trevor's wife goes nuclear. Jessica didn't waste a second. She went home, packed his entire closet into garbage bags, and dumped them on the front lawn. Then she called his boss. See, Trevor wasn't just some average guy. He worked for a big family-friendly company, the type that loves a good wholesome dad image. And Jessica knew all the right people in HR. By the time Trevor got home that night, he wasn't just homeless. He was jobless. Oh, and just for fun, she froze their joint accounts. So now, no money, no home, no job. And the best part? Melissa had no idea any of this was happening. Not yet, because I was saving that for step 2. While Jessica was personally destroying Trevor's life, I was making sure Melissa's was next. I sat down with my lawyer and filed for divorce. Not just any divorce. A full-blown, take everything and leave her with nothing divorce. Full custody of my daughter. No spousal support. No claim to my house, my savings, or my retirement. And just for fun, a request to terminate her parental rights to my son. Now, normally, that last part wouldn't fly. Courts don't like taking parental rights away unless there's abuse or neglect. But my lawyer? Oh, he was good. She committed paternity fraud, he said, tapping the DNA test. That alone proves she's been lying to you, and to your son, for a decade. If we argue that it's in his best interest to have stability with you rather than a mother who's been lying about his entire existence, we have a shot. And Trevor? I asked. Oh, we're hitting him too. You and Jessica both have grounds for emotional distress lawsuits. If we coordinate, we can bury them in legal fees before they even step inside a courtroom. I grinned. Do it. Now, let me tell you something about legal paperwork. It's one thing to know your world is about to fall apart. It's another thing to have a stranger in a suit physically hand you a stack of documents saying, "Congratulations, your life is ruined." And that's exactly what happened to Melissa the next day. She came home from work, arms full of groceries, all happy and clueless. And waiting for her on the kitchen counter, a big, fat envelope. She picked it up, smiling. "What's this?" she asked. I didn't even look at her. "Open it." So she did. And the second her eyes hit that first page, her face drained of color. Melissa was about to find out exactly what happens when you betray the wrong man. And trust me, you haven't even seen the best part yet. Melissa stood there, gripping the divorce papers like they were burning her hands. "Brandon, what is this?" She looked up at me, confused. Not scared yet, just shocked. Like she never thought this would happen. Like she really believed she could cheat, lie, wreck my life, and still come home to a normal marriage. And for the first time in weeks, I felt completely calm. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said. Her mouth opened, then shut. Then, just like I knew she would, she started lying. "Baby, this isn't what you think. I can explain." I didn't answer, just took out my phone, opened her own text messages, and slid it across the table. She picked it up, saw Trevor's name, saw every single text, saw the DNA results. And that's when she finally realized. There was no way out of this. She sank into a chair, face pale, hands shaking. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't do this." I leaned forward, rested my elbows on the table, and said, without an ounce of emotion, "You did this, not me." And then, I walked out of the room. 3 weeks later, we were in court. Melissa and Trevor sat on one side. Jessica and I sat on the other. The judge went over the case, looked at the DNA test, looked at the texts, looked at Melissa, who was crying like a freaking soap opera actress. Then he looked at me. "Mr. Carter, do you still wish to proceed with full custody?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes, Your Honor." Melissa let out a full-on sob. Trevor dropped his head into his hands. And the judge? He ruled in my favor. Full custody of my daughter. No spousal support. Melissa lost all legal rights to my son. By the time we left the courtroom, Melissa looked like she had aged 10 years. And me? I was just getting started. Because trust me, this was about to get even worse for them. The courtroom was bad. What happened after? That was worse. Because while Melissa and Trevor were still reeling from the ruling, their parents were waiting outside. And they had questions. A lot of questions. Melissa's mom, sweet, church-going, never raised her voice mom, was the first to speak. "Melissa, please, tell me this isn't true." Melissa sniffled, wiped at her eyes. "Mom, how could you do this?" Now, let me tell you something. When a 70-year-old woman suddenly starts screaming in the middle of a courthouse, people pay attention. And oh, she did not hold back. She went off about family, loyalty, respect. How she'd raised Melissa better than this. How she had brought her up to value marriage and family, not to go around sleeping with her own husband's brother. Meanwhile, Trevor? Oh, he was getting it just as bad. His dad had him by the collar, practically shaking him. "You broke your own brother's family apart?" Trevor was stammering, red-faced, looking anywhere but at his dad. Jessica? She just stood there, arms crossed, watching the show. And then, the cherry on top, Melissa's dad turned to me and said, loudly, clearly, in front of everyone, "Brandon, I want you to know, you will always be part of this family. But as for her," he pointed at Melissa, "she is not my daughter anymore." And Melissa collapsed onto a bench, sobbing. Trevor stormed out. Me? I walked out of that courthouse with my kids, my dignity, and my future. Melissa walked out with nothing. And Trevor? Oh, his suffering wasn't over yet. Because karma had one last trick up its sleeve. Fast forward 6 months. Trevor and Melissa? They ended up together. I know. Shocking. 2 cheaters finding comfort in each other? Never saw that coming. Except, here's the thing. They weren't happy. Not even close. Because Melissa lost custody of her kids. Trevor was still unemployed. Jessica won everything in the divorce. House, car, savings. She even got his dog. I sued Trevor for emotional distress. And won. Now, Trevor was broke. Melissa was homeless. And they were living together in some cheap one-bedroom apartment. No money, no family, no future. And the best part? Jessica moved on. Oh, and guess who she started dating? My lawyer. Life has a funny way of balancing the scales, doesn't it? You ever hear the saying, you reap what you sow? Because Melissa and Trevor, they sowed lies, betrayal, and destruction. And what did they get in return? Each other. 2 cheaters. 2 liars. Trapped in a tiny, miserable apartment, with nothing left but regret. Meanwhile, me? I had my kids, my dignity, my freedom, and best of all, the satisfaction of knowing I won. Because at the end of the day, karma doesn't just catch up. It steamrolls.